Hi guys, so I wanted to do I guess what we call a real-time sharpening video. Real-time meaning very minimal editing. We'll just take you through the entire process from the beginning to the end. And I actually have a lot of requests for these videos, even though they don't typically do super well on the YouTube view side. So I don't really do them that often, but I have a lot of you reach out and say that these are super helpful. And so since we're still sort of recovering from being sick for a long time, we'll do a pretty simple video. So let's get started. I'll also, real quick, leave links to everything that I'm using down in the description and links to referenced videos. So this knife is dull. I mean, I could cut myself if I'm pressed down into it, but we won't go there. The stone I'm using is the Sharpal. I don't know how they want you to say this. Double-sided diamond sharpening stone, excellent sharpening stone. It's really, at this point, it's my go-to sharpening stone. And it comes with this nice little case as well. I'm not affiliated with this company in any way at this point in time. It's just a really good value sharpening stone, and you get your money's worth out of it. And then lastly, we're going to be using a 6-micron diamond strop. I made this strop in another video, and I will leave that link in the description. DIY strop, you can make this for about 20 bucks or so, and then whatever diamond compound you want to use, you can put on the top. This is a better strop than you can buy pretty much anywhere at this point, other than a few sources. So if you're willing to do a little bit of DIY, this is probably going to be the best strop that you can buy for the money. So when I get started, I always start on the coarsest side. I really hate starting on finer grits because they just take way too long. So I just almost always go all the way back to the beginning, especially on a knife that's this dull. And we'll set the knife on the sharpening stone, and I use the rule of thumb. I go over this in another video as well. Again, like I said, all the reference videos are in the description. Basically, I put the spine of the knife directly in the middle of my thumb, and then I set the thumb on the sharpening stone, and that's my angle. I have no idea what angle it is, but that's the angle that I sharpen the vast majority of my knives. The rule of thumb. So I'll set the thumb on the stone, and we'll use it as a guide. You don't drag your thumb on the stone and peel your skin off. A lot of people reach out and say that they've done that. Don't do that. So it's just sort of a reference guide. So put it on the stone. A lot of people also ask, how much pressure do you use? It's hard to sort of explain pressure on a video. I've seen some people put stones on scales, and I think that's kind of, that's kind of dumb, because then you'd have to put the knife or the stone and the knife on a scale and do the whole pressure thing, and it also varies depending on where you at in the sharpening process. So, a good guide is don't, force this thing down into the stone super hard, and it's not like a feather touch along the surface. It's just enough so that you feel the abrasive working. I don't know if that really makes sense, but another thing that I do here is I usually put my index finger, this is my index finger, right? I usually put that right on the tip of the knife. And the reason that I do that is I also use that as a guide. It will help you. So basically my thumb in the spine and my index finger on the tip. And that allows me to not overshoot the sharpening stone, because as soon as I feel my finger hit at the very end of the sharpening stroke, then that means that I stop and I go in the opposite direction. I hope this is all making some sense. And then, how much do you sharpen on each side before you switch sides? Well, the idea is to keep both of these bevels even. So we need a towel here. So as you're sharpening, keep an eye on the bevel size. If you see one bevel getting larger than the other, then switch sides and sharpen on the smaller bevel. And that'll keep your bevels nice and even. So basically, keep your bevels even until you apex. So going in the opposite direction, use your index finger as a guide, and about right there. And just remember that spot on your index finger, and that's where you put the knife. The idea here is to just figure out your hand and finger placements so that every time you take the knife back off the stone and you put it back on the stone, you put your hands and fingers in the exact same spots. That'll really help you maintain an angle. I'm going slow here. I think a lot of people think that freehand sharpening is a slow process, and it is at first, but once you get the hang of it, there's really no faster way to sharpen. There's no fancy guides or anything like that. You can really sharpen knives super fast freehand sharpening. I mean, in less than 60 seconds, you can go from extremely dull to practically hair whittling sharp if you know what you're doing. So I'm just looking at the bevel sizes, trying to keep them even. We're almost there. And what we're doing here is we're sharpening to form a burr. And after a while, after you've been sharpening a while, you almost feel the exact moment that you apex. So we're really close here. So back to angles here, there's all kinds of tricks you can use to find the initial angle. I go over some of these in other videos, which I'll link below. What I do here is just match the original angle, the one that's already on the knife, by simply looking at the exact moment the very apex comes into contact with the stone. It's really that easy. Alright, so I can feel a burr. If I take my finger, I can feel a burr formed on the opposite side of the side that I was sharpening. So if I'm sharpening in this direction, which I just was, the burr is going to be on the top side. If I'm sharpening in the opposite direction, the burr is going to be on the top side, away from the stone. And actually on this knife, I can visually see that I formed the burr. So at this point, I am done. That's as fast as it is. It doesn't take a whole lot of time on a coarse stone. Now you can, at this point, if you're into those more saw-toothy edges, you can take this right to the strop and be done. I mean, as slow as we're going here, we're talking a couple of minutes worth of time. So that's why I recommend a very coarse stone for beginners. And the reason is because the fewer passes that you have to make on the stone, the faster it gets, the faster you get the job done. And that means that the smaller amount of time you have to maintain that perfect angle. So imagine if we had a stone that was coarse enough where we could make a single pass on the stone on each side and apex, everybody would be able to sharpen to an absolute expert level. We don't have stones like that. We do have coarse stones, so rather than one pass, maybe we apex in 10 or 20 passes. If you go to a too fine of a stone in the beginning, you'll end up having to do hundreds, if not thousands of passes, and that's hundreds or thousands of times of passes that you have to maintain that perfect angle. So that's why I don't recommend a too fine a stone in the beginning. Now once you get the hang of sharpening on a coarse stone, then you can move on to the finer stones. So here we have the burr we just formed, and you can see it wrapped all the way over to one side. This is actually a very small burr, and I can't really see this with my naked eye. It can be felt though. And this is what you were trying to accomplish on the coarse stone. If you don't form a burr on the coarsest grit, you won't form one with finer grits. In other words, if the burr isn't formed, don't think it will get sharper moving on to a finer stone, because it won't. You'll just get more frustrated. Now, just to sort of demonstrate a purpose here, we're going to go back to the coarse side, and we're going to do some burr removal passes. And basically what they are is they're the exact same angle that we sharpened at, but very light alternating passes. And this is going to help minimize and reduce the burr, so that when we do go to a strop, we'll have less work to do on the strop. Because sometimes, especially on these stainless steels, S110V is sort of notorious for hanging onto a burr as long as possible, and it can be difficult to remove. You want to minimize the burr as much as possible before you go to the strop. Now, at this point, you really shouldn't be able to feel a burr too much along the edge. And here's what that minimization does. It takes a very stubborn, solid burr and breaks it up into fine pieces that are just barely hanging on. It shreds the crap out of the burr, so to speak. And we'll move on to the strop. And I strop at the same angle with, I would say, medium pressure. And this is sort of where your leather is going to come into play. If you have a real spongy leather, some leathers are spongier than others, you're going to want to use lighter pressure. If you have a real stiff, hard leather like this here, you can get away with using more pressure because it doesn't wrap over the edge as much. That spongy leather will tend to wrap up over the edge like this, and that'll actually round over your apex, which is not good. But with a good strop leather, you can get away with a little bit more pressure. And again, you want to maintain the same angle on the strop as you did on the sharpening stone. I see a lot of people get into trouble on the strop by changing their angle. So they'll end up bringing the knife back like this and then up. Don't do that. It's very easy to do. I still do it myself occasionally when I'm in a hurry. Maintain that angle and bring it back. And you can do several passes in a row. I find that alternating passes really helps remove stubborn burrs, and this is all steel dependent. It's steel dependent, it's heat treatment dependent, so you're going to have to kind of learn what your knife likes in terms of burr removal. I have some knives. I have a knife over there. It's a shop knife that I was experimenting with heat treatment with. It's made out of A2 tool steel. That knife will sharpen to hair whittling sharp in no time at all, and it's extremely easy. It does not hold onto a burr. It's a very good knife to sharpen. It would be a very good knife to learn on since it sharpens up so easily. This S110V, it tends to hold onto that burr for a long time. Oh, that's actually really sharp. And yeah, that's actually feeling really nice. Let's see how we cut paper. So that's pretty good. For very minimal work, right here on video, off of a coarse stone, that's very good. So a lot of people think that the paper test is a sharpness test, and that's not really true, because what will end up happening is you can cut through paper with a pretty dull knife. What we're using the paper test for is a burr removal test. So after a while, again, this is experience dependent, but after a while you'll sort of get the feel for when your knife has a burr on the edge and when it doesn't, when it's cutting through paper. So there's very little, if any, burr on this knife left. We did a pretty good job just sitting here on this is off of the coarse side of the Sharpening and a 6 micron strop. We'll give it a couple more passes here just to refine the apex a little bit more. And I don't even think I'm going to go to the fine side. I like coarse edges. I think they work better for the vast majority of purposes. You have that sort of micro sawtooth edge, and that does really well cutting a lot of stuff. maybe maybe those coarse grit edges don't last quite as long as the more mirror polished edges do, but the amount of time that you're saving going through all of that grit progression just to get that tiny bit of extra edge retention, in my opinion, really isn't worth it. I think if you're really worried about edge retention, you need to make sure that you're completely deburring the knife. That's a huge one. Again, I'll leave a link to a video on why that's so important. And the steel, the heat treatment, hardness, all of that sort of stuff also plays a role when it comes to edge retention. So I think we're probably pretty good here. So yeah, I mean, that's S110V sharpened up really nicely in a couple of minutes. I mean, we really took our time here. We could have done this in less than a minute if we weren't chatting about this. Let's see if it's shaving. I'm 100% confident it's shaving. Oh yeah, it's just before it even touches the skin, it's popping hairs. I mean, hardly touching the skin and it's popping hairs. S110V, a lot of people say that this steel is a nightmare to sharpen. It's not with the proper abrasives, diamond abrasives all around, and you shouldn't have any problems. And here's the final edge. Very little, if any, burr remaining. This is a shaving edge, and it's a great working edge that takes very little time to accomplish once you get the movements down. I typically don't sharpen too much finer than this, simply from a time standpoint. That's it. It's really that simple. A little bit of practice goes a long way. I recommend practicing when, don't sit down and practice for 3 hours at a time. If you find yourself not getting good results in the first 10 minutes, then take a break. What a lot of people get wrong is that they'll practice imperfectly. So I think the saying is, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent, perfect practice makes perfect. I hope I said that right. But that's it. Make sure that you are maintaining a perfect angle every time on the stone, and take your time. Spend 5-10 minutes a day, and over the course of a couple weeks, you're gonna get much better. Coarse stone, 6 micron strop. It doesn't have to be 6 micron. You could get away with a 4 micron. You could get away with an 8 micron, somewhere in that range, even 10 micron. You're going to get results like this. Now, another question that I know I'm going to get asked is, what about hair whittling sharp? Can you get hair whittling sharp off of this setup? Yes, if you go to the fine side, and then you go through a 6 micron and then maybe a 2 or a 1 micron. You'll be able to get some really, really, really nice edges off of that. And that setup will last most people the rest of their lives, and they'll be happy with that setup for the rest of their lives. It all comes back to the skill involved. It's not the exact stone setup. Stones matter more for the user experience than it does for your actual sharpness. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful, and yeah, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.